Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, welcome to the second holiday hack episode of 2022. If you listened to the last episode that we posted on Thanksgiving, we were talking about 10 qualities of successful leaders. And we're going to talk about each one over the course of the next 10 episodes through the end of the 2022 calendar year. Last episode, we talked about that successful leaders are highly self-aware. Please go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already. On this episode, we're going to talk about the fact that successful leaders are credible. They are credible people who report to them, who work alongside them, and who they report to would think that if this person is saying something, that they mean it, that they're being truthful when they say it. I like this a lot because I think, hopefully everybody's credible. But if you want credibility as a leader, you need to be credible in general.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about just being credible, building trust, making sure that that you're consistent, but most importantly, just being able to, I think, just do what you say you're going to do and role model things for people. And that's such an important part of leadership. It sounds easy. It sounds so basic. Most people would roll their eyes and be like, oh my gosh, like, of course. But it's always in the little things. It's always in the nuance. And a lot of times that the little things in the nuance, I use the quotation marks, is because these are things that may not be big or important to you in the role that you have, but they are bigger. They are important to the person that's talking to you about them. And in those moments, for us to show up and to be credible and to do what we say we're going to do, and not shirk off responsibility, or not deflect from wanting to do the thing. I think those are spots where, as most leaders, we have to make sure that we're doing those, even in the times that again, it's not like we're in front of the room making a gigantic commitment, or we're sending an email with, here's what I'm going to do, A, B, and C. It's the little things of, hey, can you take a look at this? Yeah, I'll take a look at that. And then a week from now, hey, what's going on? And we're like, okay, I have a chance right now. I can either lie and say that I did and I'm still working on it, or I can say, I got to be honest with you. We talked about it. I totally forgot. That's my bad, 100%. I'm going to look at this right now. Like, those are the things, and those are the moments where we're at the crossroads of our credibility, and we have to look at those things very, very seriously.
Yeah, I think if you there's no such thing as a person who has not dropped a ball on this. Dropping the ball on something doesn't make you less credible. It's what you do after you dropped the ball. So a leader who says, I know we talked about this and I completely forgot about it, let's go take care of it right now, that hasn't hurt their credibility at all. In fact, it's helped their credibility. It means that you can rely on that leader admitting when they've made a mistake. Credibility doesn't have to do with not dropping balls. Credibility is, how do you clean up the mess when you have inevitably dropped it? Because there's no such thing as a leader who doesn't drop balls. There's no such thing. It's going to happen. And so this credibility piece is so important, because in an effort to make their people believe that they haven't dropped the ball, they lose credibility. And I guess sometimes it works out. Sometimes they don't realize that you dropped the ball. Sometimes you can avoid the conversation and make that person believe that everything went well. But you can't always do that. And eventually it will hurt your credibility. And then people will look back on everything else you've done and start to question that too. Credibility is a real tough one to get back once you've lost it. You can drop a ball on something, and if you handle it the right way, people will forget it was dropped by the next day, and they'll move forward and move on with you. Dropping a ball is an honest mistake, right? It happens to the best of us. We all can lose sight of things, and we all can make mistakes and forget things. That's totally fine. You can very easily come back from that if you're not doing it daily. Credibility, even if there's only one little mark in your credibility, it's something that you will carry with you as a leader for a while. There needs to be multiple incidences of where a person can reliably say that you're a credible person before they will forget the one blemish that made them think maybe you were less than credible. It's the way humans work, because we want to be surrounded by people who we believe are credible, and we want to know that they if we're basing our actions on the things they're telling us, we have to be able to rely on those actions being true, or it's self-preservation to at least take it with a grain of salt. If your people are taking what you're saying with a grain of salt, it means that you don't have the credibility that you should have as a leader.
Absolutely. And so with that, I do want to ask you a question. And when was a time where you maybe were concerned about your credibility, or where you were at the crossroads of making a decision that could have led down the path of losing some credibility? But first, I do want to give it up to a word from some of our sponsors. All right, so Chris, we're talking about credibility here, and we're talking about times in your career where maybe you felt like I might be potentially losing some credibility here, or a situation where you knew in the moment, I as much as this might pain me, or I might have to admit this, I need to do the right thing that will maintain my credibility. When was the time that happened to you in your career?
Yeah, so I'll just use something that happened very recently, actually. So I was questioned on something by a leader that I work alongside around why something happened a certain way, and I actually didn't know the answer to it. I didn't know why it happened a certain way, but I speculated. I made a guess on why it happened a certain way because it seemed logical at the time. And the way that it was, that the guess was presented, it wasn't presented as a guess. It was presented as this is probably what happened. Like, so it wasn't like a definitive, but it was in my mind, I could think at the time that I can't think of another reason why this would happen besides this one. And so I stated it as that this was the reason it happened. And the reason is because I felt like the person asking really needed an answer why. They needed to know why in the moment. And when I found out what the actual reason was, and it was completely different than what I told that person, in the moment I knew that by this time when I found out, they found out too. They knew the reason why also, because we kind of found out at the same time. And I could have just kind of brushed it aside, not said anything. It wasn't my mistake. It was somebody else's mistake. But in my mind, I was thinking, if I just let it go, then that person is going to think that I am less credible because at the very least I'm speculating on why something happened as opposed to actually knowing. And so I made a real point of pulling them aside as soon as I could and to say, hey, you know what? When you asked me about this, it was a guess and it seemed logical at the time, but clearly now that we know everything, it happened differently than what I thought it was. But I just want to let you know that, if you, I wasn't telling that as fact. It may have come off like I was saying this is a fact. This is how it happened. It was purely a guess and it seemed logical, but clearly that's not how it happened. So I want to make sure you know that it was a guess in the moment. And so because I think a lot of people would have just kind of let it go. Like it's out there. It wasn't anybody. The mistake in question wasn't on me. But it turned into a mistake that was on me because of how I kind of defended a person or kind of like, stood up for them in the moment when they probably shouldn't have had that defense. And so that's a great example. And it can happen just as quickly as that too. It can happen. It doesn't have to be based on a mistake. It could be on really saying anything that ends up not being 100% truthful, or not holding up, even if you didn't mean to say something that wasn't accurate in the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a good example, and I will share. I tend people that know me know that I have a pretty big sense of humor. I enjoy laughing. I enjoy cracking jokes. I enjoy trolling people. There's probably people listening right now like, yep, definitely 100%. That's who he is. And there are definitely times where I may tiptoe the line, maybe cross the line a little bit, or maybe do something that I think is humorous with somebody who they don't have the same sense of humor, or like they don't find certain, kind of jokes or comments to be as funny as I do. And as a leader and over time, I've gotten that feedback many times of like, you got to be conscious of not, overusing your humor. You got to kind of read the room, that type of thing. And there was a time where I was having a conversation with a couple of people, and I made like a little joke. And again, in my mind, not a big deal joke, nothing that's crazy, but just something kind of silly. And in the moment, though, after I did it, I was like, I don't know, like my brain was like, maybe not the right audience for that kind of a joke or whatever the case was, right? And then it was probably 2 or 3 or 4 days later. And one of the people that were in that group came and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And they brought it up. And I said, you know what? You are absolutely right. first and foremost, thank you for coming to me and telling me, right? Because like I know it's probably not easy to do, but I appreciate you doing this, and it really speaks to your character and your values, and I greatly appreciate that. And I wholeheartedly apologize, because even when I said it, I was like, maybe not the right audience, and I'm like, but this is also something that in my life and my career, I have gotten coaching on, to a degree, and people have talked to me about it. But I appreciate that, and thank you. And you have my commitment to be more conscious, to make sure, right? And really look in those moments to make sure. And it was a great conversation, because they said, like, even though personally they're like, it's not like I was offended or I was upset by it. I'm coming to you because it could maybe offend somebody else, like that type of thing, right? So it was like kind of like one of those types of conversations. So I think it was just somebody had a good amount of kind of social IQ, and what I appreciated about it was they shared it from their experience, but then after I explained and what I apologized for and talked about it, they then said like, yeah, like at the end of the day, not that big of a deal, but I wanted to make sure that I said something about it, right? And so I think those things are so important from a credibility standpoint, is that you have to own up to things. You have to speak out. You have to share an appreciation for it. And then you have to make commitments to do different behaviors in the future, and then live to those things for people, if you're really trying to establish better credibility.
Yeah, I think the most important part of that story is, and something, if you're listening right now, I've been in situations like this, both as the offender and the offendee, when it comes to things that are said. The most there are very few leaders out there, I think, anymore who would come back in a defensive way, almost like oh no, that's not how it happened. That's not, you're misreading it. You're doing it. Like, I think most good leaders nowadays would at least not try to go down that path. But where I can see a lot of leaders going down the pathway of is owning it, but making light of it too. Meaning it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see where that would be the case. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean it like that. Didn't mean to offend. All right, move on. Right? Mm-hmm. And the your reaction to it, which was you're totally right. That little voice in my head did say something afterwards, so I can see where you're coming from. I completely own that, and I apologize. And this kind of almost over the top of being of owning it and making as big an issue of it as the person coming to you. Meaning you don't overdo it, because that looks like you're patronizing them. But if you underdo it or try to make light of it in the moment, even if you own it, but you make light of it, that will undermine your credibility as well, because they will leave that conversation thinking that you apologized because it was a requisite. You apologized because you were just trying to move past it or not even acknowledge what happened. If you meet them where they are in terms of how they approached you, then you will solve it from a standpoint of maintaining or earning that credibility back, and saying that they'll leave the conversation thinking, okay, that was the right thing to do, to come to Lorenzo and say this about them. He owned it and he moved forward with it. And I have full confidence that will never happen again because of the way he owned it. Getting an apology out of somebody who's making light of it doesn't leave a person with the belief that it will never happen again, just that you necessarily, at least admitted that you did it. So I think it's very, very important to kind of meet them where they are from a gravitas standpoint.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this holiday hack. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.